Hello everyone. This is your friend from Naruto Audio Fanfics, and we are back once again with a brand new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was sent to Suna for a secret wager and fell in love with Temari, Naruto times Temari times Gaara, Part 1. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit the like button, thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing Naruto fanfics like this. So without wasting any more time, let's start today's fanfic. Naruto looked up towards his comrade and best friend as he told him to do everything he could to rescue Sakura and run, because he didn't want to lost another important friend. Disbelief filled those cerulean hues as they focused on Uchiha Sasuke as they were located on the branch of a tree in the forest outside Konohagakure. Their fight was with one similar towards the blonde ninja. However, those words had struck him with something, inspiration or perhaps a complete realization to the situation. Everyone was doing their best to fight this battle, to protect everything and everyone that they held precious in their hearts. Standing up with a quiet set of determination and confidence, he scoffed slightly before starring up towards the other bearer of a demonic presence, Gaara. I thought he was strong, was the first part of his speech filled with this newly acquired determination, as his fists began to clench at his sides in a way to control his emotions. As soon as he had spoken, however, a surprised Sasuke would stare at his friend in complete astonishment. Was Naruto actually thinking about going back up to try and hold his own against that psychopath, again? Is Naruto crazy? There was no way Sasuke was going to risk losing his best friend and Sakura all because Naruto thought he was ready to fight. That is, until he heard the rest of the ninja's statement and recognized the determination lighting the clear of his eyes like a fire. But it was a rage of blue instead of red and orange dancing in the line of his Sharingan. I thought he was strong at first, because he fought only for himself and for love of himself, but I was wrong. Being strong doesn't mean fighting for yourself, it's giving your all to protect something or someone important, then and only then do we have the strength to do anything. Naruto continued to lock that cold glare towards the partially intrigued Gaara, his thoughts moving back to the story that the red-haired male gave him in that hospital room. It infuriated him to think that something like that he let someone who believed being alive was only confirmed by murdering others let him scare him. He was Uzumaki Naruto, the one who'd outshine all previous Hokages, and he was frightened by someone who was just like him. At first, I thought we were just alike, that is, until I realized something in your words, Sasuke. A fox-like grin would be flashed towards the male as he glanced towards him, knowing well that his friend was relying on the cursed seal rather than his own abilities right now for strength. When you fight to protect something, you're fighting past your own limits, and like Gaara, I have had no one look at me with any human decency except Iruka-sensei and Kakashi-sensei. My childhood was something that will haunt me until the day I die, but, unlike me, you had a family. For a split second, Gaara tensed as he debated that thought momentarily when the words had left Uzumaki's mouth and was about to protest to them, until he was cut off. It doesn't matter what your father did, what about your teammates, they're your family too, right? And you just knocked your own sister out of the way just to get your high off killing someone. Naruto's anger was beginning to rise even more than it had initially as he glanced towards the side form the corner of his eye, viewing the sand kunoichi that was a silent spectator to the events. Naruto. Sasuke had never seen the boy so intent to fight someone, so wound up to finish a battle with an intent to kill. He knew better than anyone that Naruto couldn't kill the demon, that stood opposing them. Nothing I say will stop him now, and damn it, I expended too much chakra using this seal as a backup. I can't stop Naruto even if I tried to move. Sasuke cursed himself mentally as he fell back to his feet, looking up to see Naruto's fist swirling with chakra in response towards his anger. He had the feeling the boy was about to do something more to amaze him, even if he hated to admit it. This fight was now in Naruto's hands. At the same time as this, the sand kunoichi that took refuge towards the bottom half of the surrounding trees would have met those eyes briefly, and they caused her to flinch. They seemed to be confirming his statement as she tensed, thinking back to the times growing up with Gaara, and the murderous intent that her sibling harbored ever since he was little. She was able to control his emotions better than most, but, was this her and her family's fault? Or was the Uzumaki dunce correct in assuming that Gaara did have family that cared? Albeit, She was frightened of him more than anything in the world, but how would she feel if something by some miracle was able to kill or almost kill her baby brother? Temari was a bit unsettled at this mental development or debate rather, that was roaming through her mind. Her thoughts were focused on the words that had left the younger Nin's mouth moments ago, as she couldn't avert her gaze from those clear pools of blue. Uzumaki Naruto. No matter. He still can't stop Gaara. She had to find a way to occupy her thoughts from the altering revelational speech, and would have succeeded too. If of course, Naruto would have simply ceased to talk at that point in time. I never had a family. I don't even know what it's like to have the thought of a sister or a brother's affection, because I was always alone. I was outcast and despised, my existence seemed to only bring pain, but you simply knocked your sister back and probably would have killed her. You and the rest of the sand ninjas came into our home and tried to destroy it. Stopping, he smiled as he released the grip of his clenched fists and took his gaze from the vessel of the Shukaku's sister, to Gaara himself. I am Uzumaki Naruto. I have no one to protect or love but. Because of that I'll protect everyone. Eyes from all directions would come to rest on the boy as he declared that to the world, thoughts forming in the very core of all witnesses' hearts and minds. Sasuke could only blink before smirking slightly, his head falling to the side as he mumbled something towards the blonde. Show off. Temari stood there unchanged by this statement, until it hit her entirely. I'm a part of everyone too. Gaara could only smirk, those aquamarine hues staring hungrily at the new resolve Uzumaki held, because that would make it all the sweeter when he tasted his blood. However, there was a surprise that was more than what the Shukaku vessel had anticipated, as he noticed the hand seals the boy was using. His Kage Bushin no Jutsu, so what if he makes a few clones? Uzumaki, they won't be able to save you. Gaara could have only imagined how wrong a few clones were in estimation, as suddenly a set of thousands of Narutos began to occupy the treetops in every corner that the ninjas could have hoped to occupy. Nani. Sasuke could only stare with his mouth agape, never in his life seeing a replication of such magnitude being performed with such ease. Who was this kid that stood before him? It couldn't have been Naruto. There's no way he could have improved that much in only a month's time as there. Then again, as he witnessed the Naruto 2000 hit combo, he could only assume that he was insane to believe it was all true. Temari watched in disbelief as Naruto assaulted her brother, and actually managed to damage him. This was something that up until now had been achieved by the Uchiha, but even he couldn't have hurt Gaara more than a small flesh wound at the time. For once in her life, she saw the bloodlust in her brother's eyes, even at a great distance for her own safety, reach a new level of desire. He found that blonde-haired idiot, though she admit he was more skilled than he appeared to be, a worthy enough challenge for the true form of the Shukaku. He released it. The true form of that, the demon inside of Gaara. We're all dead, she thought as she watched the ongoing fight now between her brother and Naruto, who was championed by a summoning jutsu, the frog boss himself. Where could have the number one most disappointing ninja have learned to pull that one off, yet alone, hope to defeat Gaara? The battle cry for his opponent's name caused her to hold on to the tree she was stationed in, trying to ignore the ecstatic, Uzumaki Naruto. Temari couldn't believe the determination she witnessed, and the completion of what she felt was an impossible feat, the defeat of her little brother and the demon within him. Was Gaara also one of the people he wanted to protect? Naruto was running up the head of the Shukaku beast, as his fist would be jammed right into Gaara's jaw, successfully awakening the sleeping boy, thus disabling the true strength of the demonized raccoon. Everyone had been watching him, because this was his battle. He was the only one who stood a chance against Gaara, mostly because of his training with Ero Sennin, but more importantly that he too had a demon sealed within him. He refused to acknowledge any type of defeat, and was most thankful for the frog boss making him his official subordinate due to the fact that it would have been impossible to land this strike in the first place without it. They're all watching me now, like they did then, and soon flashbacks of the past moments flew into his mind and line of vision. After Naruto had declared that he would protect everyone, because he had no one, he began to form the hand seals for his Kage Bushin no Jutsu. He was expecting a good number, but even he was surprised at the thousands of complete shadow replications he had created, but now wasn't the time to revel in his accomplishment. Immediately he, counting every single Naruto that the eye could see, charged the mentally insane Gaara. They assaulted him with a series of punches and kicks that he dubbed as the Naruto 2000 hit combo, knocking the boy back and disabling some usage of his sand. It was then that he had to keep track, though the taste for the attack was less than appropriate. The 1,000 years of pain that Kakashi had done to him during the bell test was issued with the combination of an exploding tag. Ha! Even after Naruto had struck the area right underneath the tail, nothing seemed to happen for approximately a good minute, having blown both Gaara and himself back. Gaara, however, was suffering from the loss of sand that held up his demonic attributes. I didn't expect him to attack there. Gaara was beginning to enjoy this battle even more than his bout with the Uchiha, as Naruto seemed to be full of surprises that kept his confirmation for existence burning with renewed vigor after each attack. He hadn't expected he would have to resort to using the full transformation in this destruction plan initiated by his country, but it was worth it to see how Uzumaki would react. At least, that was how he reasoned, having his body be the starting point for a rising raccoon made of pure sand taking up a destructive amount of the forested area. Uzumaki Naruto. Well, this was something Naruto didn't expect right offhand, but he was already on his way to roll with the punches as he took a bit of blood onto his fingers and smirked. Now, I'll get to show off my new move. Sasuke will be jealous. Wait, no time for that. I have to save Sakura-chan, protect Sasuke, and even that girl Temari whatever, the sand lady. Summoning technique. With that said and the blood price for the jutsu paid for, Naruto found himself standing quite smugly atop the boss frog's head as he looked across towards Gaara, who was mounted inside, yet atop the Shukaku's head. That was as far as his momentary flashback was given to him, as he soon noticed that the frog boss's tongue was wrapped around him and protecting him from sand outside his body. But what about the sand that was starting to get him from underneath? Crap. Crap. What do I? Wait, that stupid fox. Naruto didn't have time to think about it twice, as he demanded the Kyuubi give him some of his chakra. After all, if Naruto died, so did the greater demon as well. From here, the rest is pretty much easy to discern. Gaara was defeated and changed by the mindset and will of Naruto, who in turn was severely drained and battered up during the fight. Both were taken back by their respective teammates. The fighting was over, but the thoughts that lingered in its wake were not. Temari was on the other side, Konkuro, carrying Gaara from under the shoulders as they traveled through the trees. All she was able to see, or identify, was that Naruto had managed to defeat her brother and dispel the Shukaku transformation. And then, they had a final exchange of punches atop the trees in which both were lost for a time. She and her brother found their sibling beaten and terrified by the crawling blonde, and she herself was frightened with the fact Gaara lost. Of course, the Kunoichi kept this to herself until she heard the one line that forever changed her life, aside from Naruto's declaration to protect everyone. Temari. Konkuro. I'm sorry. Their brother had apologized to them after that battle. She fathomed that something was said between the two that had altered Gaara's person, and the defeat to the most unthinkable ninja in the world might have been another factor to it. Right now, the only thing that mattered was getting Gaara to safety. She could thank Uzumaki later. Approximately 2.5 years later, sitting within the shinobi village of Konohagakure, the Hidden Leaf Village, an overly bored boy would be found devouring his 14th bowl of ramen from the Ichiraku ramen stand. Was it good? Asked the old man behind the counter as he was already working on his favorite customer's 15th bowl of miso pork ramen. Those rich hues of blue would look up immediately from the bowl, adding an innocent taste to the blonde ninja, as he replied with energy. Yeah, more RAMMMMEN. It was the same reply issued over and over for the last 10 minutes. Uzumaki Naruto, the number one loudest ninja of the Hidden Leaf Village, was enjoying the beginning part of his day with glee. Usually, when nothing happened, it caused him to become bored and a bit agitated. However, just knowing that later during the day he'd be called on to complete his A-rank mission was enough to keep his spirits high. Before Naruto could dwell more on the vague mission that Kakashi-sensei informed him about earlier, another bowl of ramen was placed before him as he turned to completely decimate the unsuspecting food. The owner of the Ichiraku ramen stand could only smile and shake his head passively, well, that's our number one best customer for you. Meanwhile, in the office of the Godime Hokage, Tsunade was referring to a packet that held detailed information on a mission request document. Sighing, she would turn to lie back in her chair, hoping desperately to have a drink and be rid of this paperwork. It wasn't that she disliked her job. However, the paperwork was hell. Tsunade would simply smirk as her assistant Shizune happened to walk through the door of her office and tossed her the packet. Tell me what it says, Shizune. I wonder what else I should do before the secret mission Kakashi-sensei was talking about starts. The boy would be walking down the busy streets of the village. The cold stares placed on him by the majority of the village went mostly ignored since he came to find that now he has people that care. The rest can go to hell. Naruto smirked as he decided to check on Sakura-chan and see how she was doing, yet at the moment he decided to run off. With a poof of a smirk, a Junin stood in front of him. Yo! Naruto stopped immediately, jumping back some at the sudden appearance, but could only help to reply. Kakashi-sensei. The gray-haired Junin would smirk underneath his mask, not that anyone could tell directly, but the movement of his eye indicated he was at least attempting to smile or something, right? Hello Naruto. I assume that you're ready to hear about your mission. The youthful ninja smirked, his finger being moved directly underneath his nose in a gesture. You bet, Kakashi-sensei. So, what exactly is this mission about? The older male smirked underneath his mask while feigning ignorance to the details of this event, while leading his pupil toward the tower of the requested Hokage. He followed the steps of his instructor with complete obedience, and upon entering the office of Konohagakure's Hokage did what he felt was necessary. Obaa-chan. This was responded by a twitch and growled wording from Tsunade. I told you to stop calling me that. Naruto only smirked before shrugging. Anyway, Oba-chan, what's this A-rank mission you have for the future Hokage? She sighed. Watching his eagerness caused a slight smirk to come to play as Tsunade decided she'd play on Naruto's ego for a moment. Well, Naruto-kun, before I tell you what the mission details, let me explain to you why you're the best fit for this job and why you'll be working alone. Tsunade purposely stressed the last word to gain the younger ninja's attention completely. He was dependable for missions involving teamwork. However, Naruto rarely had to ever conceive the notion of performing a solo mission at the level of Genin, even with the act that he could probably be considered Junin level already. Naruto could only look at her with curiosity, those eyes becoming mere slants as he debated himself the reasons why he would be sent on a solo mission, knowing that he worked best with Sakura-chan and Kakashi-sensei. Well, Oba-chan, spill it already. Why am I the best fit for this mission besides the fact I'm the number one ninja in the village? It was during this time that the silent spectator, Kakashi, interrupted Naruto's comment. The number one loudest and surprising ninja to be sure. The blonde simply scoffed, folding his arms over his chest while his head moved to be stuck up in the air. Yeah, so I've been told. Tsunade couldn't help but place a stifled giggle at these antics, before remembering the details she were about to divulge to Naruto. During the time of the third Hokage, our current allies from Suna, mainly their current Kazekage Gaara, you were able to defeat and in turn alter his way of proving his existence. It is in this fact, Naruto-kun, after the mission to retrieve Gaara, that the friendship between the both of you was acknowledged in the eyes of current witness parties from both sides. Tsunade paused for a moment, hoping to see whether or not the boy was able to catch on from this point. He did after all have exponential growth in the company of that pervert Jiraiya. The boy would take a moment to look at his older sibling-like figure, before thinking hard on what she was telling him. Obviously, whatever this mission was, it had to do with his friendship with Gaara. Therefore, he could assume he might have to go to the hidden village of sand. Tsunade-ba-chan, since basically what you're telling me revolves around Gaara. I guess that means that this Super A rank mission is a request from the Kazekage himself. A hand would move to stroke his chin briefly, as Naruto glanced at the Hokage with slight intrigue. Or maybe it was a complete loss of insight. However, our favorite ninja was not immediately answered by Tsunade, but Kakashi instead. Well, it seems even Naruto has learned to state the obvious. Of course, this attempt to push Naruto's buttons worked, but not as well as it would have, say, maybe 2.5 years ago. What? I do just fine stating things, Kakashi-sensei. The boy seemed to find himself growling the last remark while both adult figures took a minor laugh at his expense. Sometimes it was still too good not to pass up on a chance to embarrass or degrade their younger affiliate. Anyway, began Tsunade, yes, this is a direct request from the current cage and be met to the letter since he was so vehement on this arrangement. This immediately caught Naruto's attention due to one simply fact, and that was Gaara wasn't passionate about anything that he could ever tell. Those cerulean hues would turn to widen in apparent shock that Gaara's name and any word relating to passionate or emotions in general could fit into the same sentence. He did admit that his friend was indeed getting better at socializing and acceptance, but to be passionate about signing Naruto up for a mission. So, Gaara wants me to do something for him. Okay, well, I never let any of my precious people down, so I promise to do it no matter what it takes. As he spoke those words, his trademark of a fox-like smirk would dart his face pleasantly, making him look childish but in an adorable manner. It was those words, with her own smirk and mental check, that Tsunade wanted to hear. Good, then let me go ahead and inform you about what the mission actually is then, Naruto-kun. When did she start using the kun honorific instead of her more adoring term, brat? She had no idea, but playing on his ego was quite entertaining even if she meant the politeness. As a sign of good relations between Sand and Leaf, we needed to send someone to live in Suna and assist the cage directly for about a year or so. And as you guessed, he chose no one other than his dearest friend, Naruto-kun. And maybe because we've arranged a sort of surprise to ensure two unsuspecting people's happiness, while keeping good relations, hey, I'm good. The silent Junin smiled as he turned to disappear in a poof, having seen the desired reaction from his former pupil, having accomplished his own personal mission. Well, kid, good luck, you're gonna need it. It was about the time of that single thought, that the youthful blonde's mouth was slowly starting to close after his jaw dropped intensely. He was supposed to leave Konoha, the village that had come to be his home and future residence of power once he became Hokage, for a year. Ba-chan, are you serious? I can't do this, no. I can't just leave everyone for another year. I just can't. Naruto thought to himself before hearing a rather familiar and annoying voice all at once. Well, Kit, you've got no choice since you stated that you promised to do it no matter what for your precious people. Not going back on our word now, are we, Kit? The Kyuubi wore a painfully smug expression, knowing that his vessel would commit himself to this regardless. Who know, you may even enjoy yourself in Suna. Shut up, Kitsune Tem. I never go back on my word, baka. But still, I just got back from my training trip with Jiraiya and we still haven't found Sasuke yet. Naruto was abruptly seized by a newly established depression, for if he left Konohagakure for another year, wouldn't Sasuke have become Orochimaru's vessel? Tsunade took notice to the boy's obviously depressed appearance and offered a knowing smirk, as well as a slight flicker in those red hues. Our reports and those of our allies in Sand have confirmed that Orochimaru and Sasuke have been operating in Wind Country for some time after your last encounter with him, Naruto-kun. It kills him to think about the Uchiha boy becoming Orochimaru's vessel, she thought before seeing his newly vigorous form standing in front of her with pure determination within his eyes. If there's a chance to bring back Sasuke by going to Sand, then I'm definitely going. Tsunade could only smile before dismissing him, telling him to go prepare for this departure. Okay, thought Naruto as he was packing his belongings into a pack, since I'm going to be gone for a while I should probably fill my frog wallet and see that someone can pay the old man for the ramen I usually eat while I'll be gone, and then I say goodbye to everyone. Just as he had began the approval of this plan, the Kyuubi's voice would echo from the far reaches of Naruto's mind. Well, Kit, maybe you should do all of the above, but perhaps you should think your details out a bit more carefully. You might be overlooking some things. Yeah, and what exactly might that be, you stupid fox one? Questioned by the Kyuubi, Naruto began to reanalyze his plan thoroughly, only to find nothing in flaw. Sisht. I don't see anything missing or overlooked at all, you baka kitsune. If the Kyuubi had not accepted his ceiling within the boy and Naruto as an extension of himself, he would have allowed the blonde shinobi in wonderment. Well, for starters, Kit, you're going to the hidden village of Sand and you're packing nothing but ramen and a ridiculous amount of orange and black jumpsuits. It's a desert area, Kit, you need to dress accordingly. I'm sure you need more of your ninja weapons and perhaps other things of your interests as well. Naruto thought about the words the Kyuubi had instilled to him mentally inside, hating the fact that the Baka Kitsune was right as he looked to see his traveling pack consisted nothing of black-orange jumpsuits and ramen packages. Ah. That means I have to go shopping now. Around 5 that afternoon, Naruto had completed all errands that he needed to before his mission was to begin. After drawing a sufficient amount of funds from the bank, the teen immediately proceeded to purchase clothing, kunai, explosive tags, a soldier pill or two, a medical kit on the suggestion that he learn to be able to treat his comrades' wounds, and a sketch pad for his newly developed taste in drawing. He had managed to convince Sakura to draw from his bank account and pay for 15 bowls of ramen a day, and saying goodbye to everyone was easier than he thought. Great, stated an overly pleased Uzumaki as he strutted to his apartment home to finish packing. Well, that was his intent, at least until he noticed a note that was placed on his door instructing him to the Hokage's tower ASAP. Elsewhere, a purely attractive kunoichi would be seen standing in the presence of the Hokage and her personal attendant, Shizune. The tone of her hair held the golden lure of pure desert sand, while her fair complexion was made focused by the complementing lavender kimono. A forehead protector that was worn more or less like a necklace, or bandana wrapped around one's neck, with the sand insignia and the rough smirk were more than enough to identify the young woman instantly. Ah, Temari, I was informed that you'd be coming to pick up the little package for your brother. Tsunade would look towards the younger kunoichi with a slight smirk, her mind coming across rather amusing notions as she awaited a reply patiently. Temari would simply nod after giving a respectful bow to the Hokage of Konohagakure. My work as the liaison between our two villages made me the ideal target to pick up Naruto. My brother would not allow anyone else this mission. It was true that it was simply easier for her to pick up and escort Naruto to the hidden village of Sand, but she felt there was something more to it on Gaara's adamant instructions that she be the one, and only she. Temari blinked slightly, as she heard a voice next to the Hokage's ask a simple question. How are things with you and Shikamaru? Those silver hues would move to rest on Shizune as her arms folded over her chest, thinking about how many times she'd be asked this question, and how many times she'd hate her answer. Quote. There is nothing with Shikamaru. Shizune would frown momentarily as she realized she had touched a subject that most likely had been dealt with beforehand, but was still agitating for the Sand Nin. Nodding, she glanced towards Tsunade with a slight smile as the Sannin decided to inquire Temari somewhat. So then Temari, Tsunade began, what do you think of Naruto? The question was so unexpected that the composed young woman was unable to hide her shock to its origin. Raising a brow, she withheld a rising blush. Why do you ask, Hokage-sama? Meanwhile, Naruto had just got past 2 pesky Anbu members that were being in towards him. True, they normally treated him with respect especially now, but there were still those who rejected the vessel of the Kyuubi wholeheartedly. A single Rasengan to them both was enough to knock a little sense into the two. After all, he was being trained by Jiraiya to take on who he needed to later in life, and made his way to the office of the Hokages a few moments after all this transpired. It was quiet in there as he opened the door seconds after a statement that muffled no particular interest in the mail. Hii Aba-chan. Before Tsunade could grate him, those blue eyes were drawn to see a fairly attractive young woman with a slender frame and curves. A soft blush crossed his face, wondering who the beautiful lady was until he noted a familiar facial expression, hair, and forehead protector. Temari. He was greeted by a simple nod and a slight wave, Konnichiwa Naruto. The boy ran up to give the older kunoichi a hug, but seemed to trip on his feet, effectively tackling Temari as he fell. The two landed in a rather uncomfortable position, Naruto's face planted along Temari's chest while his arms held her body pinned underneath her own. Temari's legs seemed to just wrap around the male's waist as her body arched, looking at him with a hard-drawn breath, and blush. Pervert. Though the thought entered her mind, neither Temari or Naruto had decided to leave their rather awkward position as in fact, they both enjoyed their positions, that is until the stifled laughter of Tsunade and Shizune rallied Naruto to get up and offer his hand to help Temari up. Temari, I'm sorry, I was trying to give you a hug and I tripped and I'm sorry. Naruto blushed furiously as he helped her up, knowing that it was an accident and that he didn't mean anything perverted. Oh Lord, how he prayed that she didn't take it up that way or he was dead. and it was about that time that the Kyuubi decided to interfere with his thoughts. Well, Kit, I never thought you had it in you to go after her like that. I guess you were just lusssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssssss. Maybe you can. Shut up, you perverted fox. Naruto growled as he replied towards the Kyuubi's perverted comments about Temari's body, the blush on his face deepening to a crimson color as he thought about them, then froze. I mean. Temari glanced at him as he helped her up. The apologetic look in his eyes caused her to assume and trust that he was not being a pervert with that action, but had really tripped on his own feet. She sighed as she wondered why she had not pushed him off earlier, and was about to dismiss this as another mild accidentally case, until he uttered the words about a perverted fox. Temari knew that the Kyuubi was sealed within him, and perhaps, just perhaps, it was egging him on in a perverted manner. Naruto. She growled his name while looking at him with a rather fierce intent to kill, as her fist slammed the poor boy into the wall of the Hokage's office. Pervert. About an hour and a half later, Naruto would spring into consciousness and whine. Tsunade would look down to him with a slight sigh before turning her head to face Temari. I doubt you'll be leaving to escort Naruto to Suna today, so I'll arrange a hotel for you to stay in until you both depart tomorrow. The moment our number one friendliest ninja heard this, he simply stated, "Form nowhere. No. She can stay at my place. I have a guest room that hasn't been used before, and I'd feel bad if Temari had to go sleep at a hotel because I got knocked out for that stupid fox." He blushed and sighed. Tsunade was about to imply that Temari stay at Naruto next, but he seemed that he beat her to it, and that was all the better for her own personal agenda. Glancing towards the Sand Nin, she smiled and questioned her to the comfort of that arrangement. Temari, how do you feel on this? As soon as the kunoichi didn't give an instant remark of displeasure, Tsunade dismissed them from her office immediately. Good, now get going. Elsewhere, the Kazekage Gaara would be in his office reviewing a document that had been sent to him from Konoha a week prior. He simply still found enjoyment in reviewing it from time to time. Dear Kazekage-sama, about the details of Naruto's stay in Suna, I'd like to highlight some future hopes by extending his week-long visit to that of a year's detail, and perhaps if you accept this request we can make a little wager. If you win, we'll allow you to make Naruto a permanent Sand Nin as you requested. However, Gaara found himself staring at the page as he continued to skim down the rest of the details, curious to see how this works out himself. The thought of making his only and best friend a part of his village as a ninja was more than enough to lure the Kazekage's approval. Hokage-sama requests strange ideals. After being dismissed by the Hokage so abruptly, Temari had time to fall into retrospect. She had began to silently contemplate why she felt no objection to staying the later night at Naruto's apartment. Perhaps, she began to ponder, with his perversion aside, it's because he's trustworthy. Even with the slow altercations involving Gaara, Temari rarely gave her trust out to anyone. However, he did save her brother, sort of. The Sand Nin found herself stopping when her unofficial guide let out a very pleased, "AHA." Naruto smiled, seeing now that for once in his life he'd have a guest stay at his house for a night, and that made him a host. It was still too early to consider bed, only being about 6:25 p.m. when he stopped in front of his apartment. This prompted the ninja to release a very energetic, "AHA." Okay, thought Naruto as he opened the door and stepped to the side so as to allow Temari's entrance first. Hey, since I have a guest here, that means I can finally cook for someone too. This thought of course instantly awarded him a fox-like grin, and of course a few comments from our favorite and only Kyuubi. Well, Kit, are you sure that wouldn't be disastrous to her health at all? Behind an immense laughter, Kyuubi was actually impressed that he came to that reasoning without his interference. Naruto growled mentally before replying to his inner demon, if found there was no pun intended. Shut up, you baka kitsune, I can cook just fine now and you know it. Now either say something that matters or be quiet. I'm still mad at you about getting me in trouble with Temari earlier. Kyuubi sighed before, as innocently as he the greater demon could, smiled, which looked more like an evil grin. Well, Kit, I didn't do anything, your own body and mind didn't. And that's letting you know you're attracted to her, and hey, with age comes a pleasant experience, Kit. Kyuubi won the conversation in point when Naruto, as if on cue, was lost to a fuming blush. Sometimes he had just purely hated the fox, but in some way these weird arguments were proof of their awkwardly stated bond. Naruto could have sworn he had heard someone else's voice as he turned to see Temari stood at his door. Coming in Naruto, she questioned him with a raised brow. The kunoichi was overly impressed by his gentleman-orientated action, as it opposed to every other example Naruto had ever displayed of his behavior, and walked into the living room of his apartment with a bit of imposed shock. Maybe he's not completely hopeless, she thought as her eyes reviewed the relatively clean apartment. True, there were empty ramen packets scattered towards a door she assumed lead to his room. Temari simply surmised that the worst of the ramen trash could be found behind that door. She turned around to notice that the blonde-haired boy was still standing outside, and moved to stand at the doorway about the same time he turned to enter. The startled jump in reproach was priceless, leaving her lips to open and words to part from them. Coming in Naruto, she guessed that he was lost in thought or perhaps arguing with the Kyuubi within him. The latter seemed the most logical in the view of the analytic female as she folded her arms over her chest. Did you forget I was here already, Naruto? Temari frowned at the thought of her host forgetting her, not that she cared. But you do, echoed a small part in her mind that wasn't heard in years. Temari would begin to start arguing with her conscience. I was always simply tolerated as Gaara's sister, so one boy forgetting my presence doesn't mean anything. True, but then again, the one boy who honestly wanted to know and befriend Temari, forgetting her, is just devastating, isn't it? A mental growl would Vei emitted as she wasn't able to believe the suggestions that her own mind was giving her. He's just a friend, so I supposed it would bother me a little bit. Temari sighed as she glanced up to see Naruto's form moving around in panic. Did I miss something? And with a slight snicker her mind replied, you've missed everything he said and more. The moment that Temari asked him that question he blushed. She thought he forgot about her, when in fact was talking about her with the Kyuubi. Great, Naruto thought, one of my precious people thinks I forgot about her. In the far reaches of his mind, surprisingly without influence of the Kyuubi, he began to believe that he'd never be able to forget about her if he could. Of course this was reason that he couldn't forget any of his friends by his own rights. No, Temari-chan, I couldn't forget you. The shinobi didn't even question about how he stated that, it just left and he knew it was true. Chan, Kit, see I told you that you were just LUSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSS Naruto's thoughts with his outburst, and then implanted the memory of the boy feeling Temari's body underneath his own. It would seem my little kid is trying to grow up just a little. He knows he likes what he sees and feels. She really is pretty. And I was sorta comfortable. At that moment he began to run around in a panicked motion, on the realization that damned Arrow Sennin and Fox were beginning to corrupt his mind. That and, he really did enjoy their accidental position, but did that mean he was betraying his love for Sakura? Oi! The boy was beginning to confuse himself even more, and perhaps enter a state of mental instability if not for the hand that came to grab his shoulder. Nani. Naruto would turn around as he jumped slightly freaked from the motion, until he turned to meet at eye level with a familiar kunoichi who was simply smiling at him. A warm tone would come to rest on his cheeks as he found himself staring at Temari dumbfounded, unable to speak or say a word. Man, she's pretty. Temari would smirk as she took her finger and rose it to rest underneath his chin. So you think I'm pretty, Naruto? Well, at least he had thought that his thoughts were just what they were, until he heard and recognized the origin of her question. The kunoichi's first impulse was to blush towards his compliment. However, she forced herself not to. After all, she was Temari of the Sand. Her emotions weren't an accessory she vested. As a ninja as well, it should be that way. So she decided to play this event and learn more on the mysteries of Naruto's thoughts. So you think I'm pretty, Naruto? Even though she didn't hint to it, Temari was quite pleased by his innocent compliment as opposed to certain statements used to talk about her appearance. Temari was smirking wildly as she removed her finger from underneath Naruto's chin. Single quote. He thinks I'm pretty. And why should that matter to you? I thought you said he was just a friend. The Sand Nin couldn't immediately reply with a decent comeback, so instead decided to tastefully, if you can call it tasteful, reply with an aggressive, "Shut up." Why did it matter whether or not Naruto thought she was pretty? It was only Naruto after all, it wasn't important what he said, right? But he's important, isn't he? He. I don't care if you are my mind, if you don't shut up. It's just nice to be complimented by a boy without the bull that usually follows, that's all. Temari replied mentally to the statements her inner voice were making, while giving a quick nod to assure herself of what she just said. Well, thought. So then are you saying you'd like to compliment Naruto's body the way other do about your own? A bit provocative, Temari. This was the unexpected reply from what she recently discovered to be her own perverted mind. Nah, Nani. He's only 15, and besides, I'm not going to say anything like that about Naruto. Temari was disturbed to find that inside her calm, logical, and otherwise deadly mentality, she was such a pervert. Did it matter that he was 15 when you were enjoying the feeling of him on top of you, Temari? This statement caused the kunoichi to blush furiously, because there was some awkward truth behind it. She lucked out though, when Naruto's voice leaked into her mind, causing her attention to be diverted from her uncharacteristic thoughts roaming through her head. Well, you say. C. The words left his lips shakily as Naruto was attempting to answer. Why, yeah, of course I think you're pretty. He began to twiddle with his fingers shyly as if Hinata's behavior had been instilled within him. You're not pretty. You're beautiful, he thought while attempting to regain some composure that was more than lost, it was non-existent. It was around this time that Naruto began to notice that her complexion was a bit, well, red. Temari-chan, are you okay? You're all red and stuffs. His eyes narrowed to slits as she seemed to look at him with a raised brow. Was all that Temari managed to say while calming herself now that her mind was focused. She noticed the expression he was giving her and smirked at his concern. Yeah, I'm fine, but maybe we could find something to eat. And why did you start calling me Temari-chan? Food would be the best change of subject, considering she was actually a bit hungry, and wasn't Chan only affiliated with Sakura as far as Naruto was concerned. Oh, she's just hungry. For a minute I was worried she was getting sick or something. I'm not exactly a medical expert. Naruto's thoughts were cut short as he heard the question trailing behind Temari's statement, and honestly had to give some thought as to when he began adding the Chan honorific to her name. He simply shrugged, signifying he had no clue himself as to when this phenomenon started. I dunno, but now you get to be the first to taste my wonderful cooking, Temari-chan. Oh god. Those eyes began to widen and lock onto the pleased figure of an eager Naruto. However, Temari could only stand mortified with the thought of Naruto cooking dinner. With my luck, she mused after trying unsuccessfully to tell him she'd cook instead. Death should be quick, but. Temari sighed as she sat down on a nearby couch wondering how he managed to convince her to give in to what she felt was an accident waiting to happen. It really must have meant a lot to him. Flashback to 5 minutes ago. Nani. You're wonderful cooking. Temari watched as Naruto gave her a nod, followed by his trademark grin. Naruto. Maybe I should cook instead. The inner voice ringing within Temari's head began to assault her after the relative peace she had. You know you're curious. The genin blinked before shaking his head with a passionate refusal to her proposal. Nah, it's okay, Temari-chan, and besides you're actually my first guest ever, so I want to be a good host. It was at that time the Kyuubi within Naruto began to speak up after his own relative quiet moment. She doesn't think you can do it, Kit. Temari began to panic silently. If she couldn't get Naruto to change his mind, she'd have to eat his cooking. However, it was comforting to know he'd go out of his way to make this temporary arrangement pleasant by offering to cook dinner. The host doesn't always have to cook, Naruto, and I probably have more culinary expertise than you do. As if to enforce that knowledge, Temari crossed her arms and folded them over her chest. She then decided to answer her inner voice immediately. It's Naruto. Anything he cooks is bound to be hazardous to my health. The moment Temari put his cooking ability into question by stating she'd be a better cook, Naruto began to sigh sadly. She really doesn't think I can do it, but a lot of people have doubted his ability to do things and proved them wrong. Then I promise to make the best meal you've ever tasted, and I don't go back on my word. It's my way of the ninja, you know. She found herself staring into the depths of those blue eyes Naruto sported and seeing the sadness hidden behind them. Temari sighed. He really wants to cook for you, and do you really want to make your friend sad by being his first and only guest to deny his cooking? Temari. The kunoichi managed to place a false smirk through the use of her thin lips, as she managed a wink of sorts in hopes to raise his spirits. Just be sure it doesn't taste like ramen. End of flashback. Quote. He wanted to cook for me. With her horror aside, Temari was reasonably happy. She couldn't hope or trust either of her brothers to offer to cook. It felt good to have someone interested in taking care of her for once, even though she was the most independent individual there was. Meanwhile, Konoha's #1 loudest ninja was in his kitchen preparing dinner for both Temari and himself. He was going to prove to Temari that he could cook just fine, and he never went back on his word. Naruto pledged himself to making the best dinner she ever tasted, and he never went back on his word. This was his nindo, his way of the ninja. Temari found herself going to wait, since the chef of the abode stated that dinner would be ready in about an hour and a half, and thus gave her time to settle into this guest room of hers. It wasn't that she had many items to arrange. However, she was curious on the state that this unused room was in. Moving down the hallway and to the door next to the one in which a pathway of ramen packages marked as Naruto's room, Temari opened the door to see the room in which she would be staying in currently. It's actually not bad. Closing the door behind her, the Sand Nin was able to get a better view as she entered it fully. The walls were white as were the majority of the rooms in this building, but they weren't dingy or cracked. It was almost as if this room was freshly painted. A bed was found near the window, as well as curtains that contained a black and red checkered design. And a fairly sized closet. Simple, but it was rather well taken care of. It even had a bathroom in fairly good condition as well. It was hard to believe that Naruto kept such good care of this room, and as she was laying her traveling pack down, she began to question herself. Why does he take such good care of this room and this one only? It was about that time that the kunoichi had discovered something, a small journal of sorts, laying near the doorframe of the closet. The cover was leather bound, and seemed to be in pretty decent condition. Normally, the ninja wouldn't think twice about such objects since they usually absolutely nothing that she'd care about reading, but she was curious as to find some insight in the mind of Naruto. He was after all the #1 surprising ninja, and no one could ever really say they knew how he felt or thought. Temari blinked. Something wasn't quite right. This wasn't anything how she usually acted. Then again, when have you had a chance to just be yourself, Temari? Temari was beginning to hate the inner voice that was located in her mind, as it as of recently, has produced nothing but aggravation. This time, however, it did have a point, but it was not one in which she intended to dwell on for the time being. And what does that have to do with me being tempted, uncharacteristically, to read this journal, which I'm pretty sure should not be opened under any circumstances by his? Temari was wondering if that inner voice had been nagging her silently, urging her to look into this little book that contained possible secrets and whatnot. You've always been the tough one, haven't you, Temari? I wonder. You've always felt alone even though you've had your brothers, correct? Well, you know Naruto's always been alone, so maybe seeing how someone else truly is might make you appreciate who you really are a bit more. Okay, forget that. We both know you want to see what he wrote because we want to know how he thinks. Quote. This is pointless. It's simply a book. I have no reason to look into Naruto's private matters. Besides, his life is none of my business. Temari had said it was none of her business. However, the kunoichi's curiosity had gotten the best of her, not to mention the little fact that somewhere within her mind, a small voice was driving her insane with its repeated nagging. Naruto had haphazardly left his journal in that room ages ago, and never thought on going back for it. It was easy to discern it as a journal when the opening line stated, Uzumaki Naruto, what you don't see. Something about that line made her flinch inwardly. Exactly how different could Naruto be in reality than what he showed around to everyone? How different could he be from what she and everyone else in the world knew of him? Single quote. I don't think I should be reading this. Naruto was laboring away within the kitchen, trying to make the perfect dinner assortment for his guest to marvel upon. The blonde-haired ninja may have been a goof at times, but even he had picked up a bit of culinary talent along the way with his travels in Jiraiya's company. Of course he wasn't perfect, and the real reason he told her it would be an hour and a half in waiting for dinner, was because he was sure that he'd screw up somewhere before getting it just right. I forgot the right way to get the rice and the wine to blend right without leaving much of the alcohol in it. He was about to panic. Well, that was until he smirked. Okay, you Baka Kitsune. Help me out here. What the hell did Ero Sennin say about this when we were in the country of Wave? That was his trump card. Kyuubi always remembered everything, so he could get the information from that stubborn fox. Well, at least he had hoped it would be that easy. And what if I refused to help you out, Kit? After all, you did say that you would make the best meal she ever tasted. That doesn't include me, Kit. The Kyuubi watched Naruto's mental image from behind his cage, laughing at the horrified expression the boy was giving him. Like Kakashi and Tsunade before him this day, he couldn't pass up a chance to embarrass or enrage his vessel. Naruto growled, as he left the rice-wine mixture alone for now and was moving to prepare some seasoned chicken, all the while taking out his anger with the kitsune that was sealed within his body. Baka Kitsune. I thought you protected your own, and doesn't that mean protecting them from mistakes too? Gah. Damn you. You stupid fox. It seemed to him that his friend, in a manner of speaking in terms of their mutual relationship, was intent on being in whole at times when Naruto actually wanted his help. It was priceless the way that his kid reacted to his comments, and it was something the greater demon would never get tired of so long as he was alive. Which was another point he had to make in protecting his own, and grinned with demonic malice. Of course, there was no threat behind it whatsoever. Well, Kit, first you use your chakra to separate the alcohol from the flavor. Afterwards you slow begin to dilute the what you've separated with an additional dish that you've already prepared, or maybe some juice. But then again, if you're really LUSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSS how she felt. Naruto began to flush as he was unable to help but listen to the perverted comments that the Kyuubi began to insert into his mind, and sighed. It was about that time that he noticed he was over-seasoning the chicken a bit, and quickly began trying to correct his mistake by immediately deciding to begin cooking it. Ignoring the statement made by that Kitsune Tem, he decided while the seasoned chicken was cooking he'd begin to take the advice given behind that. Yet, his mind did keep wandering to think about a certain Kunoichi. Those silverish hues would begin scanning the paper within the journal, reading every word that appeared to her vision carefully and quickly. And just as soon as the beginning statements were interpreted, she was starting to picture a whole different Naruto than the one she believed to have known well enough. Journal entry number 1 Uzumaki Naruto. I don't know why everyone hates me so much, but they all look at me as if I was nothing more than a monster. I just wanted someone, anyone, to look at me the way a parent did their children, and I tried and acted my best while staying at the orphanage. Yet, no one ever wanted to adopt me. They only looked at me with those eyes that were more frightening than anything I can ever remember. They were like ice, no colder than that, staring at me with an intent to kill if they could, and I think I would have felt better if they did. I hated being alive, waking up every day trying to prove that I could be someone a parent could love and just being rejected by every individual that even dared to glance at me. The adults never let their children play with me, and in time even they began to despise me like their parents did. I was alone and hated, and I didn't know why. So I just cried. I'll never admit it to anyone, but back then I cried every night before I went to sleep and in the morning when I knew I'd wake up just to have people leave me in the road, curse me, and sometimes they even decided to beat me up. I just wanted them to love me, to acknowledge my existence, to let me know that they knew that I was alive and they accepted that fact. I began to believe that the only reason I was alive was so that people could hate me, and maybe that was how they were going to acknowledge my existence. Nobody cared to ever teach me right from wrong, though I had a pretty sharp sense to it for the longest time ever, and so I decided that if they were going to ignore the fact that I was a child in need, I'd become the child they couldn't keep their eyes off of. The one they would have to think about at all times of the day. I resorted to pranks. I'll admit that it wasn't something I wasn't initially proud of, but I came to enjoy it the more I did it. Then Iruka-sensei was telling us about the Hokage, the most respected member of the village, and even though he thought I wasn't paying attention, it was at that time I promised myself I'd become Hokage one day. What is the Hokage? The Hokage is the strongest ninja in the village, the leader, and most well-respected figure in all of Konohagakure. He or she is a person that will fight for everyone in the village with their life, and command the loyalty of every individual that lived in their presence. A person that cares for everyone, and commits themselves to striving not for themselves but for the greater good of the village. Of course I didn't know the true meaning to that until I got to learn more about the old man third Hokage, because he was the one who showed me what it really meant to be a Hokage. I promised myself I'd become the one to succeed him, and I knew then there would be no easy roads to obtaining that goal, and even then I knew that there would be no easy paths to take in becoming Hokage. There would be no way I could just make everyone love me and accept me. I'd have to prove to them I wasn't the monster they thought I was. I tried my absolute hardest at the academy to become someone worthy of the title Hokage, but well, I was never really that good at the academy. I failed 3 times, a first in the history of Konohagakure, and the part that shamed me the most was that I really did try my best. Looking back on it, those times I wasn't motivated to pass with all the hatred and loneliness that consumed me, but I wasn't the only one that was alone. Uchiha Sasuke, my best friend and greatest rival, we were like one and the same. But, everyone loved him, and they all hated me. That's okay though, because I promised myself I'd become Hokage, so it was okay for them to hate me. Well, no, it wasn't, but that's how I thought back then. It was sometime during the academy that I had to do the replication technique, and I was never able to do one. And well, one of my instructors told me that anyone who learned a technique form the Forbidden Scroll would automatically pass. I did my best to learn one. I practiced over and over again until I got it right. The Kage Bushin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Replication. It was then that Iruka-sensei found me, and that bastard hurt Iruka-sensei. It was around that time that I found out the truth about the reason everyone hated me so passionately. It was because within me was the Kyuubi, the 9-tailed fox demon that had almost completely destroyed the village years ago. I was about to turn to the verge of becoming the Kyuubi, allowing myself to be taken in by anger and go and slaughter everyone I could. That was until I heard what Iruka-sensei said. He accepted me. The first person to accept me was one of the people I thought hated me the most, and it was then I understood that he was so hard on me because he cared about me. Because of Iruka-sensei, I found the strength to forgive everyone and move on, so that I would become the next Hokage. Journal entry number 2, Team 7. Today must absolutely be one of the best days ever. At least that's what I thought during the time I finally achieved the rank of genin and able to start my career as a ninja. Iruka-sensei told me that I'd be leaving his tutor age and would be working in a 3-man cell that was headed by a Junin, which is the highest level of ninja one could make aside from becoming Hokage, that is. I was going to be a part of Team 7, headed by Kakashi-sensei. After Iruka-sensei treated me to some ramen, I decided to go get ready to meet my new team. But on the way to my apartment, those icy daggers kept watching me with such cruelty. Villagers began, instead of realizing that I'm not the Kyuubi, questioning the wisdom in allowing me to even become a genin. But what happened after that doesn't matter, because it hurts for me to think about it and makes me angry. Well, the other members of my team were quite surprising, because I was paired with the 2 people I secretly wanted to be on a team with. Uchiha Sasuke, my greatest rival and current best friend, and Haruno Sakura, my crush. It was about that time when Temari digested those words, that she began to feel extremely uncomfortable. She wasn't sure why. As a matter of fact, it wasn't a secret that the blonde-haired shinobi had a thing for the pink-haired kunoichi. Seems like someone's getting a bit jealous, Temari. Ignoring the inner voice that survived in her own thoughts, the young woman began to pick up where she left off. I was happy to be paired off with Sasuke because he was the best ninja when we were at school, and because I really wanted to make friends with the one person I knew understood what it meant to be alone like I did. Yet, it just seemed like he hated me, so I pretended to hate him too, even though he's actually everything I admire to be. Sakura, on the other hand, was the smartest genin of our year and the prettiest to me. I told myself that I'd do anything to win her heart and protect her, but even she hated me. Even with that rejection, I told myself that if I could prove to Sakura I was a decent guy, she'd like me, but even as I'm writing these words now and even then, I knew she was Sasuke's forever. Reality hurts, and when I came to that conclusion, it felt like my heart, did I even have much of one, was fragmented and broken. All because I loved someone who'll never love me back, but I'll move on. Yet again, another story for later. We waited a while before Kakashi-sensei finally arrived, and later on we realized that he was always late. Kakashi-sensei then decided to give us the bell test, which I didn't exactly pass, and he even did this really painful move on me. As Temari began to read details of Naruto's bell test, and this really painful move, she began to make a mental note to kill Kakashi if she ever was given the chance. Perhaps, she'd kill the pink-headed twit while she was at it for being a constant pain for Naruto to care about. Either way, she went back to reading. Well, we're receiving our first mission soon, and hopefully it'll be something where I can prove my worth, and maybe it will get my mind off these weird dreams I've been having about a desert. Aha! Finally, it's done. Grinning broadly, Naruto smiled as he reviewed the table full of food that he had prepared for dinner, and the side that was exclusively ramen for himself. He hoped that Temari would like it since he was, after all, making this for her. Kid, I've got to hand it to you. Not bad, but if it wasn't for me remembering everything, you'd have been way over your head. Hey, but you're definitely in the game for some low love ving tonight. Kyuubi couldn't pass up this opportunity to both tease and praise the boy, and savored every syllable wasted. Naruto fumed, blushed, and ferally growled. You damned kitsune, shut up. And leave me alone, will you? I'm not trying to get in her pants, you baka pervert. So, you're swinging to the left then, Kit? Hell no. Grr. You baka kitsune. I'm not gay. Naruto was seriously getting sick of the Kyuubi and sighed as he blocked all commentary from his mind. Strutting off to the living room to inform his guest that dinner was done, he soon came to stop as soon as he entered the room. Nani? Temari was nowhere to be seen, and that's when he remembered the guest room. Ah, maybe she went to try and get comfortable here. Single quote. Kit, maybe she went to go change into something more comfortable. He. Shut up, you stupid fox. The blonde shinobi was making his way to the doorway of the guest room when he knocked on the door. She could have been changing clothes, so he didn't want to just barge in there, but the thought of her in a black slip entered his mind. The response to his knock was a crashing sound, provoking him to open the door thinking that she may have been hurt. However, a different scene was apparent. Temari was on her back and his journal was on the floor next to her, opened. Naruto-san. Temari gulped, feeling for once in her life quite vulnerable and exposed. She was a guest at his house, only to be found invading his privacy quite clumsily for her Junin-ranked abilities. Privacy was something she cherished herself, so why was it so hard for her to keep herself from invading his own? The Junin would rise to her feet as she glanced towards his feet rather than directly at him, before staring straight up and meeting his eyes. Temari couldn't afford to appear weak, especially not in front of him now. Naruto-san, but he cut her short. Temari-chan. The boy's voice was deathly chill, as those blue eyes began to narrow on the kunoichi's frame. Yes, Naruto-san, apologize F. Once again she was cut off in mid-apology for her actions. Dinner's ready, Temari-chan, and prepare to tell me how good my wonderful cooking is. Naruto's expression completely changed from the reaperish tone that had been placed there merely moments beforehand. It seemed that he was now overly abundant in energy, and could actually care less about the red-handed action of reviewing the private thoughts of his existence. Granted, what she had read was 3 years post-dated, but still. Temari was for the second time in her life, completely stunned, as the confidence in her rough outer appearance was deteriorating under a simple question and mask of confusion. He's not mad at me. You're not mad at me, Naruto-san. Naruto was smirking vividly. He simply couldn't contain his laughter in any longer, and burst into hysterics. Oh man. You should have seen the look on your face, Temari-chan, and nah. If you want, we can talk about what you read, but it's pretty it doesn't bother me if you want to learn something about me, I guess. He doesn't mind me learning about OIC, Naruto's been alone for so long, I suppose having someone who is curious about learning some details about his life other than his smile and confidence must feel good. Temari found herself smirking, her own confidence and emotional boundaries placed over her person once more as she walked up towards the younger teen, who was now resorting to the twiddling of his fingers. Well, Naruto-kun, don't keep me waiting too long, if you know what I mean. Yes, my kid is finally going to get laid, and maybe start a litter of his own. Think of the blood limit your kids could have, kid, and not to mention you get the rough lover you've been lusting for. Naruto, however, could only blush and stare straight into her eyes with a nervous caution. Nani? Temari grinned wickedly, enjoying this moment a bit too much for Naruto's own good. She could hold this up for hours before letting the boy out of her tease, but decided to make the final act then. She leaned forward towards Naruto, purposely closing the distance to their lips so that they were nearly touching. Naruto-kun. Oh god, could that stupid fox be right for once? You're wonderful cooking. Don't keep me waiting. I am hungry, you know. Temari sighed mentally as her inner voice seemed to come back to haunt her. When did you start calling him Naruto-san? Better yet, when did Naruto-kun become a possibility? Temari growled mentally as she replied, after I finally began to understand just how alone he feels, because I feel it too, just not as strong as Naruto and maybe in a completely different sense, besides I respect him. Correction, you want him. Naruto mentally sighed as he listened to her words. I guess she doesn't mean it like that then. Sorry kid, I guess you'll have to enjoy her with your eyes only then. Though I admit, that's not so bad either. The close distance that separated their lips caused him to blush deeply, his face burning with the intensity of 1,000 white suns. Lawsuit from Fairly Odd Parents noted, and I'm waiting for it. As soon as Naruto moved his lips to speak, he found out that he met hers by pure accidental chance. However, much to his relief, his clumsy kiss was saved by Temari's eager return. She kissed him back, and was he enjoying it? Outside the window of Naruto's guest room, a pair of eyes would be peering inside from the window as events unfolded. A heavy sigh being issued into the passing breeze of the night sky. It seemed that her chance to get Naruto alone or to herself was wasted, as he was busy entertaining himself with a lip lock concerning a certain San Kunoichi. She just had to have had postponed it after she heard Naruto was leaving. Why couldn't she have been smart and told him then and there? Goodbye then, and without the pair's notice the figure was gone. Meanwhile, Naruto was confused as to why Temari had kissed him back, and boy was she good, but as well why did he like it so much? Wasn't he loyal to Sakura at the moment, despite having lost her to Sasuke years ago? Come on kid, what does that pink-haired girl have that Temari doesn't? You're enjoying her taste, aren't you? Isn't it just wonderful? Around the same time, Temari was lost to her own confusion and perverted inner thoughts, in place of Naruto's perverted Kyuubi. Why did she kiss him back? She knew it was an accident, but there was something hidden in that clumsily oriented kiss that sympathized with her own desires. The answer was quite simple in the end. Temari wanted to kiss him, and she knew he wanted the same if not more for her. He's not the best kisser, but you can teach him how to get better, among other intimate things. They blushed from the thoughts that were roaming through their heads, and in Naruto's case comments, as they pulled away from each other with a bit of regret evident in each other's eyes as they looked towards the opposing figure. Both Naruto and Temari were at this time gasping for breath, simply staring at each other with confusion written plainly over their facial features. She does taste good. He could learn to do a lot of things. But I love Sakura-chan. Has he gotten over that Uchiha fanatic yet? She is one of my precious people. Could he come to love me? Could I actually come love him? I wish that kiss lasted longer. I wish I was still kissing him. They both sighed, as things were just beginning to complicate themselves the more each ninja thought. As their breath began to find stability, there was one thought that they kept in common between them to the letter. This is confusing. Naruto looked over towards Temari as he continued to replay the previous moments within his mind, over and over again. He had slipped up, in a manner of speaking, and kissed her by pure accidental chance. The thing that surprised the blonde shinobi would be the fact that he was still breathing and in a condition that did not relatively compute as painful. It seemed also that the beautiful Kunoichi opposite of him had kissed him back. It wasn't supposed to be that way, was it? When Naruto even made it seem that he was going to do more than give a girl a hug, mostly due to the fact that his main contact in age was Sakura, it should always have immediately landed him a painful blow into a wall. Not a kiss, that he wished didn't end. 5 minutes after the pair had separated from their lip lock, both blondes were still in a stage of doubt and disbelief. Each wondered if they had actually shared that moment the both believed to be real not too long ago. She kissed me back. Naruto was still in his fit of self-denial, or probably it was more accurate to say his fit of unbelievable shock. It wasn't every day that a person was able to kiss Temari of the sand, and even rarer still that she would reply by returning the kiss with own of her own. It seemed too good to be true, but it was too real to ignore, and thus he continued to think about it. Single quote. Why did we have to stop? Well, Kit, you pulled back too, while you were thinking about that pink-haired of yours. The rather harsh comment from the Kyuubi was a bit unexpected at that particular time, but it always did the greater demon good to know he could still be a bastard towards the boy when he wanted to. Now, if only the wise Kitsune could figure out if that was a good thing for him or not. Sakura is not a Yubaka Kitsune. Naruto growled as he listened to the words stated about his friend, given it was another mental growl, but the wave of anger could still be felt outside of his own thoughts. Sometimes he found that he purely hated the demonic fox sealed within him, and at times he could dare to call it his friend. Hey, Kitsune Tem, do you think that I could be in love with Temari? Of course he didn't want to resort to asking the Kyuubi anything for fear of the retribution that would come with it, but he couldn't just ask the young woman in front of him if he might be in love with her now, could he? He was the boy who was always hated and ignored. Early into his childhood years he had already discerned the fact that he'd be alone, and that no one in this world could possibly register to have an attachment for him outside the safety net of friends. It was confusing to be standing there debating whether or not he could be in love with someone he had up until now only looked upon as a friend, and even as he kept trying to tell himself it was impossible to keep his hopes from the harsh truth of reality. Naruto already knew the answer. Kyuubi smirkled from behind the mental cage that kept him imprisoned, attempting his best at a half-smile of some kind, but only managing to effectively look menacing evil. It would appear that his dense vessel was beginning to understand his attachment towards the kunoichi, and of course the reasons why the Kitsune was teasing him much more than usual. Well, Kit, the fact that you went out of your way to cook for her, bugging me to remember recipes for you the whole time, the fact that you're constantly thinking about her as of late, and the fact that you wish you were still kissing her could well mean nothing, Kit. Baka Ninjan. If I had to say anything, then I would assume you do possibly love her, and that you didn't need to bother me with a question concerning your human emotions to get the answer. I hope. Suddenly a slight sweat drop appeared of the Kitsune's face, as he watched his vessel form the mental sewer that was the boy's mind. Naruto was about to go into an overly drawn-out argument with the Kyuubi for calling him a stupid human, after having his answer reconfirmed. Well, that is until a certain voice grabbed his attention immediately. Naruto-kun, what about that wonderful cooking you made for me? Well, that may not have been the most life-altering statement in the world, or the best one Temari could have used to break the silence between them, but it worked. And she was hungry. Temari sighed as her arms folded over her chest, mentally cursing herself for not saying anything that could have possibly pushed their earlier moment further. It wasn't the blonde, pig-tailed haired woman's fault that instead of her mind telling her to kiss him again, or maybe lead the moment a little further. Her stomach growled. Luckily Naruto was lost in his own thoughts, and seemed to miss that little sound. She was drawn to reality, and at the same time had to deal with that annoying little pervert that was her inner voice. Temari was beginning to become deathly sick of this voice, but it was her own personal outlet for her confusion as well. You get him to kiss you, you take control of the kiss and get all the power in the world, and the only thing you can say to him is about food. Temari. She understood that to a high degree her reply towards Naruto could be considered out of place or possibly tasteless, but the Sand Nin was on the banks of confusion as well. Shut up. He's supposed to be trying to get over that pink-haired twit, remember? And it is Naruto. It's not like he knows that there was something held back in his little kiss, but I do. Temari thought that would possibly be enough to get her mind to pause, slow, and stop. But it only allowed it to have even more statements flowing out rund in her head. Well, obviously there was more to it than a little accident. Well, not when it started, but you know what I mean, Temari. Single quote dot dot dot. I'm hungry and tired. Naruto-kun is probably just as confused as I am, well maybe more confused than me. But he won't do anything because he'll most likely think he'd upset me. You know this just as much as I do, so after I tasted Naruto-kun's cooking I'll mess with him just a little bit if you promise to stay quiet and leave me alone. Temari found herself blushing as she slowly began to realize that she was planning on teasing Naruto to get her inner voice to shut up, and satiate her own curiosity as to where his emotions really were. Sighing softly, the young woman would raise a hand to rest easily at her cheek, while an eye would focus on her little shinobi, waiting patiently for his reply. Oh crap, the food. Immediately Naruto's mind snapped from an embarrassed, confused desire to the meal he had prepared for the UNEF woman that was his guest. How long have we been in here anyway? Oh man, I hope the food didn't get cold. I mean I could always use that simple fire jutsu arrow senin taught me to heat it up but. Sighing, a rather frightened gulp would follow as he began to picture a rather angry Temari flinging him out the window slowly began to creep into the far reaches of his mind, and becoming a rather possible fear. If there was one thing Naruto was afraid of, it was angry women and perhaps a sudden and mysterious lack of ramen flowing throughout the world, but only one of those fears seemed immediate. Naruto was still a bit red, as the fuming blush had only weakened not died, as well a bit too nervous to dare even attempt to take Temari's hand. He was thinking about taking her by the hand. The slightly older Kunoichi, however, took notice of the apparent nervous behavior and began to smirk evilly, inching slowly towards Konoha's #1 loudest ninja. Oh Naruto-kun. Ye. Yes. Temari-chan. It was lucky for Naruto that was all he needed to say. This should be fun, she thought as Temari began to latch herself onto his arm and rest her head atop the boy's shoulder. Walk with me, Naruto-kun. Inwardly, she gagged at the way she sounded like some lovesick school girl. However, the moment she felt him tense the blonde was instantly amused. Single quote dot dot dot. I feel evil. Temari did not have any time to register any more thoughts, or relish in her achievements with her slight manipulation of her little, well not so little since he was basically taller than her but you get the point Naruto-kun. Single quote dot dot dot. She wants me to walk with her. Naruto was in all terms of the word confused about his feelings for Temari, especially since the slight comfortable experience he was having felt, so right. It was about this time and moment that the Kyuubi snuck a few thoughts, comments within Naruto's mind. Well he would have if the boy had been paying attention, yet the sound of voices coming from outside his guest room took his whole attention, aside from the part which wasn't solely focused on Temari at that moment. Nani? Why were there voices coming from inside his apartment that did not belong to the only two people who should be occupying that space, himself and Temari? Do you hear people outside the door Temari-chan, or am I just crazy? Blue Hughes would turn to stare at the young woman in hopes she'd confirm the fact that he was indeed, not yet in need of psychological assistance. Temari sighed, as the mysterious wailing of voices caused her Naruto-kun to become on something that didn't involve her, and when she began to realize how she felt slightly annoyed for the agitation brought by not having his attention for just a few seconds. Yeah. And the moment I find out who interrupted my fun with Naruto-kun, they're dead. Looking up to face those eyes gazing within her own rather hopefully, she simply nodded. Guess we better check it out. Meanwhile, as the two blonde ninjas made their way from the guest room to the living room, a clashing of different whispers could be heard. Add the chimes of a few crashes, curses, and broken SO meetings and the picture becomes clear. Or rather, it becomes dark, as the lights that were on as Naruto left the room previously, were now off completely. Hey, can you see anything in here? Asked one of the voices ringing from the living room area, this one apparently female in gender. Nope, but there's food. Suddenly a male voice was silenced by a rather loud smack, or at least anyone who heard the noise could assume it to be a smack. Immediately, a slightly angry female voice scolded the males. You idiot, that not for you, and be quiet. They aren't supposed to know we're here. Why? Yo, you. Think he left. This voice was also female. However, a bit shy and reserved, it seemed as if it belonged to someone with quite a stuttering problem of some kind. Immediately behind this, a rather angry woman had sent a figure crashing into a wall, effectively leaving a nasty dent in it. Perverted Sanin. Sensei. Does the fire of our comrades' youth burn brighter if we are all covered in the dark? The voice was never answered as the one who was mumbling about finding some food earlier chimed in with another outburst of his own delight. Man, this stuff is good. Some distance away from that voice, located near what would be normally seen as the door if it wasn't so dark, simply groaned and stated how troublesome the whole event was. It would seem not just one person had decided to infiltrate the Maverick Shinobi's apartment, but a variety of different individuals. All of whom sounded uniquely familiar. About this time, a very troublesome thought had entered the air, as the pair was more than curious to find who was all inside Naruto's apartment. Why they were there. Why it was so dark when he remembered there being light in the room when he left to go get Temari, and what was broken or missing. Single quote. I don't remember the lights being off. Absently, Naruto's hand moved against the wall to find the light switch, nowhere near prepared for the sight before him. Surprise Naruto. The genin could only muster a soft blink of surprise as he glanced towards the kunoichi latched into his arm and shoulder. At the same time, Temari could only look up towards Naruto as the sight before her was, rather unexpected. This could be a long night. Her attention was diverted to the teen and his dog, a very well-rounded male, and an older woman eating her food. Naruto, however, wasn't so sure how to react or begin to fathom why these people were here in his home. Everyone, one of his friends and instructors, were all crammed between his living room and kitchen. Sakura, Tsunade, as well as Shizune were sitting rather casually on his couch, while Jiraiya was slowly standing up near a very dented, if not completely destroyed, wall. Single quote. That explains the giant crash. Mon, I hope Ero Sennin is planning to pay for that or at least help me fix it. Kiba, Akamaru, Choji, and Jana were found in the kitchen near a completely decimated dinner that Naruto had poured great effort to make for Temari, though they didn't know this of course, while Guy's team simply sort of stood around. Hinata was attempting to think of something to say. However, once her eyes caught attention to Temari latched onto her Naruto-kun's arm, she fainted. Shino found himself pressed up against a nearby wall, quietly observing the events that transpired. Ino found herself attempting to get Shikamaru's attention, yet his focus seemed primarily on the sand and leaf Nin walking in. Single quote. I suppose it would be a waste of effort for me to try and apologize now. How troublesome. Nani. What's going on here? The Kyuubi was at the moment attempting to sleep, yet with his vessel's very loud mental questioning, was now fully awake. It was quite disturbing at first, but the instant he was given an excuse to poke fun at the boy, he snatched it. Well, Kit, you may have gotten smarter in the last 2.5 years, but you're still oblivious towards the obvious. Nani. What the hell are you talking about, you Baka Kitsune? How is it obvious to have people just appear in your apartment for no apparent reason, Baka? Naruto was confused, especially since it now mounted atop his emotional uncertainty, and didn't realize just yet that Temari had disengaged herself from his arm. Single quote. Why is everyone here? Sakura-chan, Tsunade Ni-chan, Shizune Ni-chan, Ero Sennin, what's going on here? Why is everyone in my apartment? Jiraiya was the first among the listed to speak, as a slight smirk crossed his face. I told you we should have left them alone, he was probably about to score. Sniff, I'll have to throw you a party, Naruto. It was this comment, or at least part of it, which piqued Sakura's anger of perverts, causing her to rise from her seat in a fit of anger. Too. If she found out that he did anything perverted, Sakura silently vowed to kill Naruto, or at least beat him within an inch of his life. Inner Sakura seemed to agree to this plan with her own, peace. During the time that Naruto was lost in his overwhelming sea of confusion, Temari had detached herself from his person. They've eaten all of my food, Naruto-kun's cooking. Now Temari is by years' worth of accumulated standards calm, reasonable, logical, and honestly blunt. However, for reasons not even she could comprehend, a feeling of rage swelled within the human shell of her beautiful figure. Something simply did not settle correctly when she viewed the four debating the merits of the food, and luckily for Akamaru the dog needed not to face the wrath of the young woman. He obtained his punishment by becoming sick. Hey, Wherever Naruto ordered this stuff from, it's great. Right, Akamaru. Akamaru. Kiba turned to glance towards his nin dog, who by some feat managed to fit into the kitchen area and apartment in general, and laughed a bit when he noticed the ill expression. I think he ate too much. Sis, could you look at him please? The older woman nodded, and was about to move to inspect the canine with credit to her skills as a veterinarian, yet she was interrupted by a light tap on her shoulder. Yes. They ate all of the food he made for us, and they're praising it to be a treat, and not even one of them thought about giving your boyfriend credit as the chef. Poor Temari. Now what are you going to do about it? Temari's anger subsided for a single moment as she raced back to that simple little word, that for some reason when she heard it began to mean close to the world to her. Could she count Naruto as her boyfriend simply because she understood, more so than the clueless shinobi, that they were both having emotional attachments towards one another? Because they shared a single kiss. Single quote. Naruto-kun. Would he even want to be my koibito? Inwardly she sighed, as a faint rose became the tint of her cheeks, and would have probably continued debating the merits of possible relationships had her thoughts not been interrupted. Oh, did you want some of the food too? I'm sorry, I was supposed to keep these three from eating it, but my little brother managed to get me to try some and well, I helped them chow down. Hana blushed faintly, while viewing the sand nin with slight curiosity. Do you by chance know where Naruto ordered this from? It was quite delicious. As if waiting for his sister to make that comment, Kiba quickly interjected with one of his own. Yeah, hey, she probably ordered it though sis, Naruto eats nothing but ramen all day. So stuff like this is probably off his radar. Hey, it's even funnier to think about him cooking. Did he just insult my Naruto-kun? Suddenly, her anger returned tremendously, as her silverish green orbs would narrow slightly on the male's figure. Of course, aside from that, her displeasure was a secret artfully hidden by a slight smile and minor cant of her head. The time during the overwhelming completion of chaotic mishaps, Naruto was saved from his teammates' wrath by a wave of defined killing intent. A chill slithered down his spine purposely slow, before multiplying in the effect throughout out each individual that took occupancy in his apartment. Turning his head to notice Temari, rather violently exploding on an unsuspecting trio, Naruto managed a passionate disapproval. Temari-chan, stop it. Quote. Yes, I did want to try the food that your group seemed to have devoured, well because Naruto made it for me. Grabbing her fan from the latched measure of her back, Temari began to ruthlessly execute her abilities as a junin and rather pissed young woman. Everyone present to witness the spectacle taking place, found themselves bathing in shock for two different reasons. 1. The perfectly calm Junin who was the liaison for the Sand Leaf Alliance, was emitting a very murderous beating of Kiba, Chojime and even Hana. 2. Naruto had called someone Chan, that was not his teammate Haruno Sakura. The said Kunoichi found herself to be the first to voice her confusion, after the initial shock was past. Quote. Chan. Did he just call Temari Chan? The thought belonged surprisingly enough to the world's super pervert, Jiraiya. He had never heard Naruto speak affectionately about a girl other than Sakura, and was beginning to believe he had some manly effect on his pupil. That is, until he saw a slightly familiar look cross Tsunade's face, informing the Sanin that she may have had something to do with it instead of his wonderful influence. Single quote. No one respects me. Naruto didn't have time to acknowledge the curious expressions that the bulk of his precious people were giving him, at least not if he wanted to save three of them from Temari's wrath. Wait. What can I do to calm Temari-chan down? How do I know she won't just get angry at me instead? He was completely unsure as to why, but he felt the latter was a current impossibility, though it didn't come to explain why he felt as such. Sighing, he ran into the kitchen in an effort to stop the breezy fit of human destruction. It was then, both were locked into a scene, or rather feel of deja vu. She didn't feel as if she was doing something that would gather attention, or was unjustifiable. After her calm explanation of her desire and interest in the prepared dinner that was no longer there, Temari did what any female ninja would do in her place. She unlatched her fan and began to brutally assault the people responsible for eating Naruto's cooking before her, and especially the one who made an insulting comment about his ability to cook. You were skeptical about his culinary skills yourself, Temari. Shut YP. I can doubt Naruto-kun, they don't have the right to do so. Because you're the only woman he's ever pinned down, Oh, being a dirty girl gives you the rights to doubt him. When did my mind become such a pervert? I've always been a pervert, you've just been too frightened of your brother before, and such a workaholic to even notice. She sighed, and was about to hit a certain dog Nin's partner until she heard a voice. Temari-chan. Stop it. Temari suddenly found herself freezing, her fingers seeming to feel weak for some reason, and dropped her immense fan. She had done something to upset him, and now, without explanation and completely out of character, a wave of guilt washed over her. Naruto-kun. Gomen. As she turned to finish her apology. Temari realized one thing. Naruto was falling on top of her again. Kyuubi smirked from his containment within the boy. He was able to see the outward events quite clearly and laughed. It appeared to the kitsune that Naruto had an uncanny ability to get the kunoichi in some interesting positions. So that explains it, Kit. You're not gay, just a submissive boy too. Ha. Immediately after this comment, the Kyuubi's laughter was intensified in a well of hysterics. It seemed he would never tire of finding a way to embarrass and torment his Kit. The only thing that was certain towards Naruto was the fact that her was trying to reach Temari in an effort to stop her anger, and ended up tripping once again. In front of an apartment filled to capacity between two rooms of onlookers no less. Those blue hues opened after closing themselves during the initial fall, and almost instantly found himself drawn into her opposing eyes. Man, I've never realized how pretty Temari's eyes are before. He could feel the kunoichi's breath exhaled harshly over his face, paired with a certain realization that sent a veil of crimson to scorch Naruto's cheeks. When he had haphazardly brought Temari and his person down, the pair rolled into another rather position once more. This time, however, a certain sand nin was dominate, unconsciously pinning a certain leaf nin to the floor. A warm flush graced Temari's beautiful face as she attempted to sit up a bit, but only managed to slip up and have her upper body fall directly on Naruto in a pressing manner. At the same time, he attempted to wiggle from underneath her, and only efficiently locked his legs within her own. They both found themselves incapable of speech, having separate confrontations on the mental and emotional plane. His eyes, they're so relaxing. Temari's so cute when she blushes. I think I like being in this position, as long as it's with Naruto-kun. Oh man, she feels so good. But am I enjoying this, or is it just some pervertedness form had Baka Kitsune? Maybe I should kiss him. Maybe he's finally over the Uchiha whore. I really want to kiss her. But, will she get mad? Temari-chan. Yes, Naruto-kun. While the nin pair were locked into a rather provocative exchange, Hinata had finally come from her faint. Narut-k. Kun. The Hyuga's attention was diverted towards the kitchen, in which she saw Temari pinning Naruto, and completely pressed against him. In response to Thai's heart-shattering image, she did what any self-respecting shy girl would when her crush was locked into such a position with another girl. Hinata fainted again. As this event was unfolding, a certain Hokage was found trying to suppress a smile. From the expressions on their faces, it was obvious that the two were thinking of each other quite fondly. Maybe my little wager wasn't half bad, or maybe Naruto's just been hanging with that pervert Jiraiya too long. With that thought in mind, she sighed as her eyes turned to lock onto the said pervert, analyzing the way he was watching the position the two were in. Jiraiya. Shit. She's going to kill me. This particular Sanin whined as it appeared he was caught doing some immediate research for his Come Come Paradise series. Hi, Tsunade-sama. Jiraiya was able to comprehend one thing as the immediate impact of her fist, cleanly shattering the bone structure of his jaw. Apparently that little interaction between the two Sanins was enough to divert the attention of all but one person from Naruto and Temari. Because of this, Haruna Sakura's world was completely shattered. She could have sworn that she just witnessed Naruto kiss Temari, and unless her eyes deceived her, that Temari kissed him back. Naruto. I'm afraid I'm supposed to be hated. And done. I can't be in love with Temari, can I? Quote dot dot dot. After the events involving Shikamaru, I told myself it was impossible for me to love someone again. So why did it have to be the one person I didn't think about, that made these emotions run wild? Single quote dot dot dot. She's so beautiful. He's kinda cute. If he took those goggles off and let his hair run free, he'd probably be handsome. Single quote dot dot dot. This feels so right. This feels so natural. I'm going to kiss her. I have to know. I'm going to kiss him. I've got to know. Whether or not I'm in love. On the impulse that final thought created, Naruto found himself pressing his lips against the kunoichi of sands, hoping to find an answer to his confusion. Oh God, she's going to H. His thought was interrupted by the eager return Temari's lips were giving him. She kissed him back again. The eagerness he felt in that leading reply was enough to confirm both parties' doubt. They were on the beginning mill of love. Single quote dot dot dot. I love her. Single quote dot dot dot. I love him. It seemed that on the immediate realization of this, both ninjas began to up the ante within their little kiss. Temari led the way, immediately taking control of this situation, as her tongue slipped inside his mouth and began to wrestle with the younger boy's tongue. Naruto was surprised as he passively gave her the winning edge in their kiss. However, the genin was far from being completel without action. A hand would find itself slither down her backside, resting on the woman's with a firm little grip. The instant in which he felt her freeze, Naruto rearranged their positions with a playful roll, so now he sat on top pinning down his lovely Temari-chan. Quote dot dot. Nah. Naruto-kun. Temari found herself calling out his name in a surprised gasp. She never imagined that he'd be as bold as he was now, and she was enjoying it immensely. The sand nin gave a lazy wink, as she found herself locking her arms around his neck and lost into a sea of blue. Temari did wonder as to her own actions as well, but didn't seem to care or mind at the moment. Dot dot dot. Everything felt so right. Dot dot dot. So how did it end so wrong? I'll have to thank Ero Sennin for writing those perverted books, or else I probably wouldn't have any idea what to do. Oh man, am I becoming like Ero Sennin or that Baka Kitsune? The Kyuubi decided to interject at this point. Hey, what's wrong with being like me, Kit? Besides, now you've finally got your slender, rough, vixen you've been lusting for right where you want her, on her back. Naruto found himself growling mentally towards the Kyuubi as he vehemently replied, I am not a pervert like you, Baka Kitsune. Kyuubi smirked and simply replied to the oblivious vessel of his. Oh really Kit? Then ask her why she's blushing so much right about now. Ha ha ha. Fine. Baka Kitsune. Advent from his mental conversation with an entrapped greater demon, those orbs of blue starred downward in study of Temari's face. She was burning with a red touch kissing her cheeks, and it caused the boy to wonder if she was okay. Quote dot dot dot. Temari-chan. She looked up as she spoke, blushing furiously as she remained completely motionless. A bit happy, aren't we Naruto-kun? Naruto was unable to comprehend what she was talking about. Of course he was happy, at least he believed he was. Before he could inquire the meaning behind her statement, the shinobi found himself or at least, felt himself against her. Oh God. It was his turn to blush now, having realized that their position provoked his little ninja to press against the young woman's crotch area. Quote dot dot. Temari-chan. Gulp. Well, at least I know he finds me attractive like that. Not to mention a bit well equipped for a kid. Don't you want to push up and feel it just a little more, Temari? Some point during their kiss, Temari began to feel a growing pressure pushing down on a radar-sensitive area for the female. It didn't take long for her to register that her little Naruto-kun was building quite the bulge in his pants. She found herself flushing vividly at the comments taking place in her mind, not to mention the blue-eyed shinobi's erection pressing against her, and became lost. However, the sand nin refused to give in to her perverted mind and SC static feelings just yet, and in turn decided if embarrassment was taking her down. Naruto was going down with her. A bit happy, aren't we Naruto-kun? Oh man, that Baka Kitsune. Crap. Naruto found that as he was getting up, since this little revelation had sent him spiraling into abysmal embarrassment, that he was for some reason feeling regret. Naruto gulped as he offered his hand to the young woman. choosing to ignore the fact that his manhood seemed to be stricken with rigor mortis. Temari-chan, I'm a Goman. He knew that his body probably crossed the line for him, and after successfully helping her up, he awaited the pain. The young woman had to be upset with him this time, right? Kit, not all women are going to punch you into the nearest wall the moment something natural happens. You really need more female contacts than the pink-haired billboard. The blonde-haired boy couldn't count the time he had come to mentally growl at the Kyuubi that day. Stop talking about Sakura that way, you baka kitsune. Besides, I already have a lot of female friends. Sorta. Lost in the statements and anger towards the Kyuubi, Naruto hadn't even thought about the fact he didn't refer the Chan honorific to Sakura's name this time. Kyuubi found himself laughing at his vessel once more. A lot of friends, but only one vixen. You're absolutely lusting for Kit. I wonder if I'll have to teach you the ways of getting comfy with your mate, Kit. Naruto found himself disturbed at the thought of the Kyuubi giving him any such lessons, and blushing at the thought of being committed to Temari as a mate. He at least knew what that meant. My mate. What makes you think she'd even consider being with me, However, his thoughts were cut short as he felt a fist connect with his jaw, and successfully knocking him out of the kitchen window. Who? Wah hhhhhhhh. Quote. You pervert. Everyone present, excluding Naruto considering he was knocked cleanly out of a window, turned towards the origin of the angered voice. It was no surprise that the figure standing where Konoha's #1 loudest ninja was Sakura. The spectators, with Temari excluded, only surmised that the boy did something perverted to invoke the pin-haired girl's wrath. So it came as unsuspecting shock, when they witnessed her being slapped quite soundly across the face. Why did he call her Temari-chan, and why do I care anyway? Sakura stood by silently as she watched Naruto move off to the kitchen in which Temari was located. The preservation of the world's natural balance was shattered the moment another woman besides her was addressed affectionately by the loud, blonde. It wasn't anything to worry about though, right? After all, she was Sasuke's girl through and through in her own mind, so if Naruto decided he liked Temari, she should be happy for him as his friend, right? Then why did she feel as if her heart was being ripped out and shattering into microscopic pieces? Sasuke. He left me while Naruto stayed and fought to protect my interests. Sakura wasn't sure when, but this was a wake-up call informing her that she cared about Naruto. But I love Sasuke. This was suddenly becoming very confusing, as the pink-haired Kunoichi found herself desperately attempting to remember all the sacrifices Uchiha Sasuke made for her. However, to her dismay, she abruptly realized that there were none. Sasuke was always so cold and distant, whereas Naruto was annoyingly friendly and approachable. She attempted to make her crush stay with her with the promise that she'd be able to make him happy. Sakura failed and instead made Naruto promise to bring him back for her, knowing that he would rather die before refusing her something. And to keep that promise, Naruto almost died. He almost died just to make me happy. The Chunin blinked absently as she began to wonder if she had always been such a horrible friend to Naruto. During the moment that Sakura was beginning to dawn on certain revelations, she chanced to look to see a certain someone a bit stiff in the pants. 1. The immediate hatred for perverts and their actions began to rise within her, and fuel her with a sense of anger. 2. She saw it as a sign that she was beginning to lose the one person that had not yet abandoned her on her personal road of life. With both thoughts, or feelings rather, in mind, Sakura found herself launching across the living room and into the kitchen to sock the boy cleanly out of his own window with her inhuman strength. I refuse to lose. Naruto. The pink-haired Kunoichi panicked. However, only her displeasure of perverts would be voiced to the world around. You pervert. Haruno Sakura was growling, while her inner persona fretted whether or not she was going to lose the blonde-haired shinobi or, the one person that so many times before, tried to make sure she was safe and content. As a result of dwelling on her inner thoughts, she was unaware of the hand gliding through the air to meet her face. That is, until it connected with a rather audible slap, and caused her to lose balance. It was about this time that a certain white-haired Junin opened the door of the apartment, his head canting towards the left as his visible eye came to close in a brief wink. Sorry for being late. Hey. HMM. The only thing that Kakashi could discern was that for some reason, this little going away party seemed a bit more serious than it should have been, and mostly because two kunoichi were set for everyone's view. Single quote. This is going to be a long night. Meanwhile, the Junin of Sunagakur was starring the emerald-eyed kunoichi in front of her with obvious displeasure. 1. She had interrupted the woman before she could question exactly how Naruto felt, or maybe send a little whisper within the wind to inform him of her feelings. 2. She sent her Naruto-kun flying through a window, with the fact that they were more than a few feet high at their current level. She was unsure why exactly though. She lashed out and slapped the girl, and even more so confused as to why it brought her so much satisfaction. Oh yeah, as if they were her own personal memories, at that instant, she began to recall every word written down within Naruto's journal, and that sudden intent to kill two different people popped into her mind. Both of which were now currently present too. Single quote. I should kill her. The thought soon faded as Temari began to allow her more logical side take over thankfully. She had been so out of character since she had been with Naruto that day, and the brief allowance of her normal mindset was actually quite revitalizing for her. So to speak. Single quote. I'm the liaison for our two villages. It's not exactly wise to go around slapping the occupants of our allies, even if they're a pink-haired Uchiha whore. Single quote. Why no? Even if she hurt Naruto-kun, I'm positive he'd hate me even more than I'm hating her right now if I hurt her more than a slap. Especially in front of Hokage-sama. Suddenly, a wave of shame washed over the proud woman as she realized that yes, the Hokage of Konoha was present to witness that act of minor violence. Temari sighed, turning to face the respected woman with a mild bow. My apologies, Hokage-sama. However, she refused to apologize towards Sakura and found herself leaving the area for the guest room that Naruto had given for her usage earlier that day. The moment that Temari was clearly out of sight, the whole of Konoha's body that was present began to go into their own curious and shocked details, gossip, and questioning as to what they just witnessed. Tsunade found herself sighing slightly, as she watched the events taking place before her and was beginning to wonder if her luck was just simply cursed. She wanted to do something that got two certain people together, but the fact that Sakura would come out of her Uchiha craze was an unsuspected event, and it was one that got her apprentice a rather harsh slap. Single quote. I need a drink. The Godime Hokage was beginning to form a headache, but for now merely ignored it as she moved over to help her apprentice. Quote. Sakura. Meanwhile, during the time that all of this was transpiring, a certain blonde shinobi was falling with shards of glass following his descending figure towards the pavement below. He didn't know what happened at first, as he was just helping Temari get up, and the next thing he knew he was flying out of his window with a painful punch being his ticket. Naruto didn't know what happened next, as the only thing he remembered was falling down painfully with something breaking most of his fall. Currently, he found himself walking within the sewer-esque placement of his mind, and began to assume that the Kyuubi wanted him for something. Quote. Baka Kitsune. I'm not the one who just got punched out of fairly high apartment complex kit. You're lucky that I take care of you so well, or else you'd have been dead a long time ago. The Kyuubi smirked as he brought up the times that his chakra and regenerative ability gave the blonde the needed edge in many situations before this conversation. Yeah. So what the hell do you want, you Baka Kitsune? Well kid, just to let you know that you're going to be leaving in about 5 seconds, you Baka Ninjan. Make sure to keep your LUSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSS silence, the Kyuubi released his vessel from their mental conversation and plane. Naruto found himself awakening on the pavement below his apartment with a pair of eyes staring down at him, but at the moment he wasn't sure who they could belong to. He felt like hell, even with the healing properties of the Kyuubi, that punch had hurt. And even he knew who was strong enough, not to mention angry, to punch him out of a window. Quote. Man, that hurt. It was at that moment that he felt a hand move to his cheek, causing him to blush at the silky filleting crossing down, and looked up at the mysterious figure with a clearer vision. I can only imagine. Naruto-kun. Blinking, he shook his head as he found that Temari was outside now, and standing in front of his person with his backpack next to her and her own slung over her shoulder. Nani. Temari-chan. The genin was slightly confused as to why she would be having their things when they weren't going anywhere until the morning. Temari, however, gave a lazy wink as she stuck her tongue out to him and began to walk. You'll have to cook for me on our way to Suna, Naruto-kun, now get up. He didn't question her words and stood up immediately, taking his pack and slinging it over his shoulder as he moved to scamper after the woman. It seemed that they were leaving Konoha that night, and he could only guess why. Temari-chan. Well, since they were leaving anyway, he assumed that now would be an okay time to inform her on his revelation during their kiss earlier, but found himself cut off. We can talk about that later, Naruto-kun. It seemed that she knew what he was going to say, and well, he still didn't dare argue with her. Nodding, Naruto simply grinned as he looked back to the village of Konoha, before walking out the gates of the shinobi establishment at the side of his escort. Suna, here I come.